Welcome back, everyone, to the Winning Play Podcast. Alongside Drew James and Robb Hue, I am Kendall Capps. Boys, we are midway through the NFL season. Once again, another week with some unpredictable results, a couple crazy finishes, but also a lot of lopsided games in the NFL. But I know, Drew, you're probably flying high after that nail-biter that you pulled out against Robb in fantasy this past week.
It makes up for the Dolphins losing for the second week in a row on a last-second field goal, the longest field goal in Bills history to beat the Dolphins, which wasn't a surprise. But, I'll always take beating Kendall and Robb in back-to-back weeks. It definitely helps. It definitely helps.
Well, let's keep it to football-related talk for now. There was obviously a bunch of moves right before the deadline in the league, most notably maybe the trade that the Detroit Lions made. They bring in Zadarius Smith from Cleveland, and knowing they lost Aiden Hutchinson for the year, and he had basically produced about half of their defensive statistics, pass rushing, sacks, hurries, that was a huge need for them. So I feel like if you're not going to get a guy like Myles Garrett, which Robb, you had talked about, they weren't going to ever get that top echelon guy, Smith might be at least someone that can help fill in some of that production for them. And then another big move to help a contender on the defensive side of the ball, Marshawn Lattimore gets moved to Washington. Now, Robb, you've watched Marshawn Lattimore for years play against Mike Evans in your Bucs, so you probably have even more insight as to what you think this trade could really do for Washington.
Yeah, Dan Quinn overall has had this defense humming, and he's doing that with a pretty mediocre secondary. So Marshawn Lattimore is going to step in, and maybe not in week one, but once he gets a feel for the scheme, he's going to step in and be their best corner right off the bat. This is a man corner. Dan Quinn does like to run man defense, so it's a good fit as well. And this was their biggest need. It's why they lost against the Ravens. The Washington and the Ravens kind of had the same thing going on, where they have the star dual threat quarterbacks that are putting up points and getting in shootouts. So it's a big pickup. The Zadarius Smith was more of a smart pickup for the Lions. They had a need, and yes, he's older, and I'd argue him being a DE instead of an OLB in that Lions defense is not the best fit. But this Marshawn Lattimore, this was also a trade where both sides won. The Saints need to offload Cap, and
they got a good price for him too. They got a third and a fourth and a pick swap.
Yeah, both sides won. I think that's actually a decent trade. It's surprising to see in today's NFL because it feels like there are a lot of one-sided or lopsided trades happening overall. But this was a big pickup for Washington, and I think they're shooting for the division.
Speaking of one-sided trades, the Dallas Cowboys, they strike again.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
What
an unbelievably bad trade.
For Mingo than they received for Amari Cooper in his prime. And paid more for Mingo than Hopkins went for this week. Am I getting both of those right?
Yeah. I mean, you could try to argue rookie contract versus older vet, but wow. I mean, Jerry Jones poorly runs his franchise, and he loved Mingo in the draft, and I guess he thinks his poorly run franchise can fix a player that the other poorly run franchise can't.
I have reached out to my Cowboys friends, and I've told them there's room on the Dolphins bandwagon. If you sneak in now, no one will notice. But I couldn't imagine being a Cowboys fan.
They're not going to make that move. I mean, it's amazing because even two separate Panthers coaching staffs had labeled Mingo as their fifth best receiver. And remember, look at that receiver room that Carolina that he's buried behind. That speaks volumes, and yet
an undrafted free agent.
It's just, once again, the Cowboys, Jerry Jones showing he needs to be put out to pasture, and as long as he's making decisions there, the Cowboys have no shot. One of their arch rivals,
let's look at something. Hold on. You have the worst rushing offense in the NFL. And your quarterback is out for the next 4 to 5 weeks, and you invest in a receiver that nobody likes. What's the thinking?
Yeah, they could have gotten Khalil Herbert too, which is it's very interesting that they didn't even try to get Herbert, who's actually he's a good running back. In the snaps I've seen and played, Like, I don't know. I don't even know why he hasn't gotten more playing time in Chicago, but I digress.
Well, mostly because DeAndre Swift since week 3, ever since I called him out for his terrible play, he's been absolutely a monster.
Literally the day after you made a whole
Yep.
video about
Good
how
job,
he can't
Kendall.
run the ball. He has
Good
ball.
job,
Hey,
Kendall.
man, there was tape on him. There was tape that like, you wonder what was he thinking, but obviously he's rectified that situation
He was
rather quickly.
just thinking, I'm going to get back at Kendall.
All right, another NFL stalwart franchise made a couple of big moves. The Pittsburgh Steelers improved on both sides of the ball, picking up defensive end Preston Smith, which is a pretty good get. And then they also, right before the deadline, pick up Mike Williams. And I know he hasn't really made any splash at all since he arrived with the Jets, but he's still someone that can stretch field. I mean, when he was on the field in Los Angeles, he had numerous big games. Like it's not like he's a big body receiver with decent hands. Like he can make a difference. Can he stay healthy? Can he fit into the offense? Can he run the playbook?
More than that,
those are probably the bigger questions.
Yeah, more than that. I mean, I love the Preston Smith pickup because the Steelers have a pretty nasty D front already, and he'll be a great rotational piece. But the Mike Williams thing is just confounding, man, because they already have George Pickens, and Mike Williams, the only thing he can do is stretch the field 50-50. So they're going to have two receivers that do that. The scheme doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
And on top, it doesn't really make any sense that they picked him up. They could have picked up, even a Darius Slayton, which is another field stretcher, you could argue that also doesn't fit, but even that fits even better than Mike Williams, at least, because he's more of a speed guy than a body control 50-50 guy. So, I mean, it's just very confusing that they didn't make a play. I guess they couldn't get some of the other guys, but Mike Williams is a pretty confusing pickup for them. I'm not sure how he really works in that offense.
Well, I wonder if maybe the thinking was, going back to Russ's heyday, what was he good at? Was keeping a play alive and then throwing the ball deep and throwing it up to people that can go make a play on the ball. And maybe their thinking is, hey, now I got two of those guys, because in his first start with the Steelers, all of a sudden that offense looked very, very different, and they were throwing the ball down the field, whereas with Justin Fields, they weren't able to do that. So maybe that was, the line of thinking there. But
they're going to run an NFL Blitz 99
sense.
offense where they have two goes, and then they're just going to see if you... They're going to run the NFL Blitz 99 where they have two goes, and then they're going to see which guy gets doubled and which doesn't, and they're going to just throw it to the other guy.
They just chuck it up. Yeah. One other trade right before the deadline that's worth mentioning, Tre'Davious White, the former All-Pro cornerback, got moved. The Rams traded him to the Ravens. Obviously, Baltimore needed some help in the secondary. They've been getting torched on a weekly basis. They even made Bo Nix look pretty good as a passer. We know Bo Nix has been solid in fantasy mostly because of his rushing floor and everything, but he even slung the ball around the yard a little bit against that defense, albeit they still lost by 30, which, thank you very much. I called that one. But, I feel like they were going after a name, but it's been 3 or 4 years since we've seen Tre'Davious White
3 years without meaningful
even close
football.
to an elite level, right?
Yeah, he's washed. I'm sorry. I don't want to say that, but it's been 3 years since he had any meaningful snaps of football. So this didn't move the needle to me.
On now the last 3 or 4 years, 3 or 4, right? Teams are just bringing him in. They're like, oh shit, he's not that guy, and then they just ship him out. I'm not really sure how much that's going to help them. I think Baltimore needed to do more to address that secondary.
Wait, he did go to the Ravens.
Really want
he didn't
to
go
compete
to the
in
Bills.
the postseason.
No, he's on the Ravens.
Oh, he went to the Ravens. For some reason, I thought he went home to the Bills. Okay.
No, which the Ravens are obviously in the greatest situation of need for cornerbacks. I do feel like it still boosts their secondary, not because he's an all-pro, but because he's replacing...
Their secondary is so bad.
There's another guy there who at least used to be...
Yeah, but the Bucs picked up Richard Sherman one year, and then he ended up being a player's coach where he didn't really play and stuff. I mean, these guys that are just it's the same with when people were clamoring for Jamal Adams and
he's
stuff.
Been on the Bills for 9 years, and then went to the Rams, and then is now the Rams. So it's only 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Bills. He was on the Bills for a couple of years, wasn't it?
He was on the Bills from 2017 to 2023.
Wow, that was longer than I realized.
This is his first year with the Rams. That's basically his only team other than the Bills. His third. So I don't think a bunch of teams are shopping him around. I think he's not as good as he used to be. But if he's not,
Well, and like you said, the floor was so low in that secondary, you could argue it's still an improvement. But personally, I'm not a believer that this is going to move the needle enough.
I would argue that it's
if
at least
they get
a
in a shootout in the
potential.
playoffs.
It's a potential improvement. I wouldn't say it's a for sure.
All right. Well, all right. Let's look ahead. Knowing we are, midway through the NFL season, let's make some predictions, guys, on NFL awards. And let's start off, of course, with the NFL MVP. Lamar Jackson is obviously continuing to play out of his mind, coming off winning his second MVP last year. Josh Allen and him actually share the best odds in Vegas right now, both at minus 280. But Drew, I know there's one other guy that you think has a chance to sneak up the board and potentially steal that award from one of those guys.
I don't know if I'd call it sneaking up the board. This guy was the favorite a week and a half ago in Vegas. It's Patrick Mahomes. Now, I personally would love to see Lamar win his third. He's playing to deserve it. If the Chiefs keep winning, though, how could you deny Patrick Mahomes the MVP? If his stats pick up according to how they've added DeAndre Hopkins, we'll start to get some players healthy, like a Pacheco, Juju Smith-Schuster, maybe even a Hollywood Brown late in the year. If this team goes undefeated, I'd be betting money on Mahomes right now.
Well, now would be the time to do it because you're going to get 10-1 on your money if you believe there's a legitimate chance that they go undefeated. Because, if they go 17-0, first team to ever finish a regular season at 17-0, and his stats are even somewhat solid compared to some of his previous seasons, it would be hard to deny him.
But let's imagine a situation. In 2 weeks, the Chiefs play the Buffalo Bills. Chiefs win that game, and Mahomes has a good game. Are you realistically going to find a situation where he doesn't win MVP after beating Josh Allen and beating Lamar Jackson and claiming the number 1 seed? When we can all...
If they finish 15-2, yeah, of course.
Like, as soon as he beats Josh Allen in that game on November 17th, I don't think there will be any question he is the front.
I will say he didn't win the MVP last season.
Say if Mahomes makes that push for MVP, what'll be interesting is to see what the narratives become, because there's always going to be splitting hairs between top candidates like that. So if Mahomes does make a push for that with the team winning like 15-2, like Kendall just alluded to, are they going to say Lamar Jackson a detriment to him is because Derrick Henry's on pace for 2,000 yards? Like, are they going to start using support like that?
How many weapons he has against... I agree with
I mean, and the other argument, though, for Mahomes is, like, I guess we're going to have recency bias, and it's going to look pretty that he beat Lamar and Josh, but
that's not even recency bias. That's just what he's done for the last 5 years.
But listen, though, it's going to be recency bias because if he goes on this tear, and what you're saying is predicated on him having more offensive output performances. He's not going to be able to do 200 yards and 1 touchdown with more interceptions the rest of the year while they still win and still win MVP.
But what did he do this week with the other odd?
Okay, but what did he do against the team that lets everyone have the best quarterback game of their life, So, I mean, listen, though, what I'm trying to say is you're going to have to hope that Mahomes puts up more offensive output, and then it's going to be recency bias because we're going to be forgetting that the first half of the year he was carried by a defense and a rushing attack, and he was not the best unit on the team. So, I mean, it'll be an interesting conversation moving forward.
How many times do you see MVP voting based on the first half of the year? He's still got games coming up against the Panthers, right? The Browns, the Texans, the Chargers, the Broncos, the Steelers. He's got, some good defenses that he could put up numbers against that would be impressive. Nobody's going to remember if in week 3 he only had 2 errors.
And that's the definition of recency bias, right?
Overlooking the other guy in this conversation, and that's Josh Allen, who might actually have the most impressive statistics so far this season. He's thrown 2 picks this year, by far a career low. He's been incredibly efficient. He's not turning the ball over in the red zone. He's still running the football. He has 20 touchdowns and 2 picks. He's going to rush for almost 500 yards again. And if Buffalo beats Kansas City in 2 weeks,
beats Kansas City,
which they tend to do in the regular season, if
he beats,
and then that also makes Lamar beating Mahomes. That also makes Lamar beating Josh Allen earlier this year irrelevant if he then goes and beats Mahomes, because then it's a tit for tat circle game 1-on-1. And then you look at one guy has Derrick Henry as his running back, and even though the Bills' running game obviously is far better than it ever has been before, but it's still, for the most part, everything's been on Josh Allen. Like, he's not Derrick Henry behind what that line is suddenly doing. And so, like, I think right now Josh Allen personally might be my favorite because I also think there's that the same reason Jokic won't always win the NBA MVP. It's
yes,
like the voters get tired, that fatigue of it, and you're tired of giving it to him. Same thing happened to LeBron at one point. You could argue LeBron should have won 7 or 8 MVPs, right? Like, but you get tired of giving the same guy.
It to Josh when he hasn't won an MVP.
Having won 2 in the last 4 years and winning last year, if they're about dead even, and Lamar is working with a little bit more and a better head coach perceived by everybody, and has Derrick Henry and Josh Allen, who's currently going off at the same odds as Lamar, puts up just as good, if not better, stats. I actually think there's some value there on Josh Allen.
Like you're saying, I would take the Josh Allen bet. I feel like Lamar, at the end of the season, will have the stats where he should win it. But my pick for MVP is going to be whoever wins this game on November 17th. Mahomes or Allen. Whoever wins that, I think, takes momentum. Or like you said, I think people are tired of giving it to Lamar too much, so I would guess one of them, whoever wins that.
Well, and speaking of Derrick Henry, how about we talk a little bit about Offensive Player of the Year? Because that's also, it's currently considered a 2-man race, and there's no one else that's even close in Vegas. And that comes down to Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley having an unbelievably resurgent year. So, Rob, which side of this coin do you fall on?
I mean, it's Derrick Henry. And, like, I mean, Derrick Henry is having an unbelievable season. And, I mean, yes, there's an extra game now compared to how there was, but he's on pace for over 2,000 yards, and I don't even know how many touchdowns. It seems like he's guaranteed a touchdown or 2 every game. So, I mean, you know, Saquon's amazing. He's got the only reverse hurdle in a game I've ever seen. You know, it was
the coolest move I've seen in the NFL since I don't even.
And it was coming
it's
out
the
of
coolest
a
move ever.
No,
it was the coolest play ever. I texted
of everyone just. What do you do?
I texted you guys when it happened live. I was like, dude, he's a video game. Like, it was. I didn't know if you guys had even seen it.
He did a toe touch while leaping backwards over a tackle.
Well, and by the way, he even before that, he set it up with an Alvin Kamara like slight shift to make the guy miss. Then he did a spin that actually was backwards from what I think everyone was thinking he was going to spin into, and then he
did a toe touch backwards over.
Well,
he
just said, "I'm at a pure instinct." He said, "I'm facing the wrong way. I know this guy's going to go low, so I'm just going to hop up." And I mean,
that's his instinct. More, I don't know what to say. Like.
Well, this
is why I'm going to disagree with Rob. I'm going to go Saquon on this. I think the Eagles have a lot of games left to come that they're going to get to showcase Saquon starting this week against the Cowboys, the worst rushing defense in the NFL. They also play the Panthers here coming up. I think Lamar's going is going to overshadow Derrick Henry enough.
Well, I was about to say, like, it's going to matter because they're not going to give Lamar and Derrick the MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. They're not going to do that. And so that was my argument earlier was like, well, it'll be interesting to see what the narratives for the MVP are because that will be used against Lamar if there is like a splitting hairs argument that he has such a phenomenal running back behind him, OPOY. Like, so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Even though we're looking at statistically, clearly the best passing year Lamar's ever had. Now that Zay Flowers is a second-year player, like this is the best passing year. I know a lot of people have questioned Lamar's accuracy, Lamar's ability to put up those numbers. He is putting up those numbers, even still on limited attempts. He's still not throwing the ball 60 times a game. But his passing numbers are the best he's ever had.
Part of that is like the ascension that I've been waiting to see from Lamar, and part of that is everywhere Derrick Henry goes, he requires so much attention that
they feed off each other. So I could see both of them not winning these awards because the others. So
you could make the argument that'll hurt their case.
That's what I'm saying.
Guys,
they'll eat
there's
each other.
one other award that probably you can have a debate in a number of different directions because so many of the others, Defensive Player of the Year, TJ Watt almost already has that thing locked up, which is kind of amazing at this point in the season.
Yeah, it's kind of done.
But NFL Coach of the Year, there's a number of candidates that have odds that could, and you can make a strong argument for Dan Quinn currently with Washington is the favorite in Vegas. They've gone from being, cellar dwellers and a pretty awful franchise for quite some time. All of a sudden, they're 7-2. I think obviously Jaden Daniels has a large part in that turnaround, but nevertheless, they're 7-2, and he is the favorite currently. Dan Campbell is right behind him with the Detroit Lions. Lions are obviously having an exceptional year. Sean Payton, shows up in Denver, and immediately they're at least a viable football team. They've already surpassed their over-under win total in Vegas. They got 5 wins already. And Kevin O'Connell with Minnesota, everyone just assumed they were destined for dead last in the vaunted NFC North. And here they are sitting at 6-2, looking like not only a playoff contender, but a legit NFC contender. So of the 4, who do you guys like? Drew, kick it off.
I feel like let's let Rob kick it off because I've got a different candidate here. But go ahead, Rob.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, for who's the favorite for who could probably win, it's got to come down to one of the 2 Dans. But I would personally put my vote in for Kevin O'Connell because I really think that I'm so impressed with what he's done for a couple years now with this team and how he's navigated it. I mean, the offense he's running, because Dan Quinn, he's a defensive coach, and yes, he has the Washington Commanders outperforming what they did last year with a very similar roster, and so he's got that defense humming, but the defense is not what's winning them games. It's the offense. So it's Cliff and Jaden's marriage that's really winning. Now Dan Campbell is not really a unit specialist. He's kind of an overall administrator of the team. But there's no denying more than any other team probably in the NFL that team has taken on his identity and fallen behind, because he took over that team when they were near winless, and then he transitioned over with the help of his GM Brad Holmes to really turn this franchise around, and now they're the most multiple offense in the league, and they will go for it at every given opportunity. So I mean he embodies that team, but I'm just the most. And then Sean Payton, no. I mean, he didn't just show up and they started doing well.
Now,
I'll Russell Wilson.
Rob hates Sean Payton more than any other coach ever made.
Okay, but also, are we forgetting how terrible the Broncos looked with Sean Payton for a couple years? I mean, they looked terrible.
If the award is for this season, then yes.
So then Kevin O'Connell, I think it would be my pick, because I love what he's kind of done, slowly built the team and always had an offense. Yes, it was Kirk Cousins who's doing well before, but I love what he's done with Sam Darnold. I mean, this guy has a true offensive scheme in the line with Sean McVay
pretty
and
impressive.
My guy Liam Cohen. It's very impressive what they've been doing. And they lost Darisaw and went out and, they got Cam Jackson, I believe his name is, from Jacksonville, and he came. Cam Robinson, and he stepped in seamlessly. Yeah. So I just really, I don't think he'll win, but I really love what Kevin O'Connell has done with this team.
Kendall, what are you taking?
I'm taking Dan Campbell. I think the Lions will finish this year with maybe 2 or 3 losses at most. Yeah. As Rob talked about, no team has taken on the personality of their head coach. I mean, I would run through a wall for that guy. When you hear him speak, man, is he a great motivator? But also, he has stones, and his players know it. The opponents know it. Everyone knows what they're going to do on almost every 4th and 1. And it's just go ahead. I dare you to try to stop us. They had 4th and goal from the 5 twice. It went for it both times and scored touchdowns both times against the Packers. You don't see teams go for it on 4th and goal from the 5. Who does that? The Detroit Lions do. That man
certainly
does.
Not Todd Bowles.
Well,
team does.
Dan Campbell does. And I have spent the last 6-7 years wishing the Dolphins could find someone like Dan Campbell. It's only who had been the Dolphins.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, though, his GM has been on fire, and he has one of the hottest offensive coordinators in the game. So, I mean, it is, I mean, look, I love Dan Campbell, and I actually agree with you, Kendall. I think that if I were putting money on it, that he would be my Coach of the Year candidate. But, I mean, there's a lot of things that had to go right for Campbell because he's not a unit specialist, right? So he doesn't run either side. Yeah. So he's, so he does need the right hiring, but that's a skill in itself. So, I mean, I'm with you.
And so my surprise pick here that's not listed, and I will agree with you, Kendall, on Dan Campbell is probably my most likely to win pick. How are we not saying Andy Reid should win
And
this award?
Andy Reid, I knew it. Yeah, Andy Reid
Are
for
we
sure.
serious? He is clearly the
Yeah.
best coach in the NFL. His team is undefeated, though their entire offense is on the sideline.
Yeah, I mean,
And they're signing guys
Andy
off
Reid
mystery.
and Brett
When
Leach,
have they
by the
won
way.
12 games in a row? At this point,
Andy
dating back
Reid
to last
and Brett Leach. Like
Andy
Brett Leach as
Reid
well as
should
GM
be
of the
the
year.
coach of the year for probably 10 of the last 11 years. And he should win this. So that's my take. But I bet you what, if the Chiefs do go undefeated, so he takes the coach of the year. So if I'm putting money down, I might throw a few dollars on.
Again, though, it's like one of those things too, where I guess like I see it differently, or I'm picking a part of it. It's like the Chiefs are led by their defense, at least right now, or the first half of the year, and that's not what Andy Reid coaches. So, and he also has Patrick Mahomes. So but he also has Patrick Mahomes and stuff. So I don't know. I 100% believe that he's the best coach in the NFL right now, but the best coach
And
doesn't
his
always
team
win the
Don't have
has
coach
he's
yet
of
done
the
the
to
year.
best
lose.
job. Well, but I think
Yeah.
to Rob's point, he's saying McConnell, he's had a bigger imprint on the team's individual success because he is the play caller and he has transformed that offense, and he has transformed Sam Darnold from being what we all knew the pumpkin Sam Darnold to be to putting up borderline Pro Bowl numbers, like seemingly overnight. Like
He just looks a little bit more like Pumpkin Sandar.
I saw him on Sunday night throw for 295 and 3 touchdowns. I mean, that didn't look like a pumpkin
We
to
also
me.
would be saying very different things if the refs didn't miss a heinous face mask call in the end zone. Like if they had won those games and stuff, I mean, you wouldn't be saying any of that. It's just when it comes to these coach of the years and MVPs, you have to have hair splitting arguments. And for me, it's like if a team's led by the defense, you're gonna give the offensive coach the coach of the year. I mean, yeah, Andy Reid's the best coach. No
Well,
one
we're
would
only
rather
8
have
weeks
their
in,
coach
like,
than
again, or 9 weeks in. I think the Chiefs' offense is about to come on, but still, Andy Reid has
100%.
coached the best team in the NFL for what, 10 out of the last 11 seasons.
No, that you're exaggerating that a bit there. You're forgetting that there was an entire Patriots dynasty in there.
And
Of which Andy Reid was still the second best coach in the NFL for all of those years.
Yes. So there you go. Second best. All right.
4 straight
move on,
NFC
guys.
final games.
Let's take a. It's time for us to make, as we said, we're midway through the season. There's no better time to make your Super Bowl predictions. We have plenty of data now to have a solid understanding and grasp of who are pretenders, who are contenders. So, Rob, who you got playing in February?
the Jets. No, I'm just kidding.
Was that your pick at the beginning of the season?
Yes.
Okay. Go on.
Yeah, and Drew, not all of us picked the heavy favorites for the Super Bowl. Just to
You know
to,
what's fun about
throw
betting on
you
the
a little
heavy
jab.
favorites is they win a large majority. of the
well, and
time.
you know what's funny? Because now I'm going with the heavy favorites. It's
You're
gonna
going
be the
Chiefs.
Chiefs. It's gonna be the Chiefs and the Lions. Yeah, I mean because the Titans love to be kingmakers. They love to give away the best players on their team to championship rosters. So AJ Brown to the Eagles helped them win. Derrick Henry to the Ravens is looking like that's gonna help them. And now DeAndre Hopkins is looking like he's going to unlock the Chiefs offense, and they already had one of the best defenses in the league, and they have a running game that doesn't get huge chunk yardage, but will get 7 yards a pop every time and beat you down. So, I mean, it's pretty hard to root against the Chiefs. And then on the NFC side, the Lions, their offense is so multiple, and they did just get Zadarius Smith, who's not like an all-pro player, but they needed that spot taken up. They need a presence there. And I just don't see the Lions losing momentum, even in a tough division.
All right, Drew, how about you? Who you got?
Let me let you go first. I got a controversial pick, I guess, but
Okay.
go ahead, Kendall. Who are your picks?
So preseason, I said Kansas City and Detroit. I am going to stand by that. And I like the Chiefs to beat the Lions and to become the first team to ever three-peat, and I'll tell you why. And it's funny because Tom Brady actually detailed it this morning on the Colin Cowherd show. He called this Lions offense one of the best offenses he has ever witnessed since the early Peyton Manning Colts that were loaded with Edgerrin and the receivers and everything. And he detailed a lot of times the best way to slow down and to beat those teams that have a nearly unstoppable offense because they can run the football with multiple personnels and run different packages, and they can hit you deep, and they can dink and dunk, and they have tight ends over the middle. The way to beat them, don't let them be on the field. And the Chiefs have been one, as we know, really, really good at running the football now. And like the New England Patriots, both dynasties, they threw the ball to get into the red zone, but they run it in the red zone to get their touchdowns. That's what New England did for many years, and the Chiefs have been doing that. Kareem Hunt scores every single week, and Pacheco's coming back. And Kelsey, we've seen him starting to come on, tied a career high with 14 catches the other night. So, like, all that talk of, oh, he's unproductive, he's over the hill. No, he can still play. And now with the offense having the ability to move it through the air, but still being able to dink and dunk when they need to, I think they're going to hold Detroit off the field enough. And when it matters most, you got to believe in Mahomes. So I think the Chiefs
by the way, listen,
will become the first team to ever three-peat.
I'm with you, Kendall. I actually see that too. I think the Chiefs are a bad matchup for the Lions if there is such a thing. But I do think, like, DeAndre Hopkins is interesting because I think his biggest boon to the team will be as a red zone threat. Listen, Mahomes.
I'm sorry, did you see the 70-yard catch 2 nights ago?
I did, and that's my point. If you let me get it out, is that Mahomes, he was backed up against the line and pressure and lofted. Everyone's gonna give him credit for it, and look, he made the play, but at the same time, he threw it into.
Everyone's gonna give him credit for it because it was the perfect
triple coverage
ever made. Yeah,
what?
Give him credit for it.
Yeah, I mean, look, if that had been intercepted, it was just as turnover worthy a play as anything else. Yeah, throwing it in triple coverage when you're under pressure is always a good idea, right?
Yeah,
so, I mean,
if
I
you're
guess
not
if you have
Patrick
DeAndre...
Mahomes, it sounds dumb, but when the throw's complete, it sounds like you're just Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is our all-pro safety just made a terrible play. He sat there waiting for the ball instead of going up for it.
Let's get back to the Super Bowl talk now. So, Drew, you said you had a controversial pick. What is it?
So, I'm going to take the Ravens to lose to the Lions.
Interesting. So you think Baltimore and Lamar finally gets over the hump?
And I'm actually kind of hoping for a three-peat. I hope you're right, Kendall. I think the Ravens show out and beat Mahomes in the playoffs. And then I think I can't make an argument for the Lions not winning the NFC. But I think that it's a shootout Super Bowl with the Ravens beating.
I like that pick.
I mean,
that'll
be a lot of fun to watch. Now, granted, Lamar is now 24-1 against the NFC. He played the Lions last year and beat them 41-7. I think
handily.
He sure did.
Now, I don't know. I still love the Chiefs. I don't disagree with anything you guys have said about why they might three-peat, but I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say the Ravens get there, and if they're playing the Lions, I think they win the matchup.
I actually agree with you, Drew, on Lions beating Ravens if that's what happens. Just my issue with that is you said the Lions beating the Ravens.
No, I said the Lions beat the Ravens. I said the Ravens beating the Lions.
Oh, you did?
No, you said the Lions beating the Ravens.
Yeah. No, I'm saying the Ravens beat the Lions in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you said Lions won the first two times. But yeah.
Okay.
So,
gotcha.
well,
so
actually, then I guess I disagree with you
because
I like that matchup for the Lions way more than the Chiefs. My problem with that is just I have to see Lamar I have to see Lamar do well in the playoffs first of all, let alone against the Chiefs. But like do well in the playoffs first, and then also I have to see him just be his big brother,
like
Mahomes.
The Ravens will win the Super Bowl, and everybody's going to sit there and say, "Well, but Derrick Henry was so good." So how much credit can we give to Lamar? And that's the conversation we'll be having next year.
I've been as big of a critic of Lamar's as anyone you will find. And if he does win a Super Bowl, if he gets past the Chiefs, or if the Bills beat the Chiefs and then he doesn't have to beat them, I won't knock that against him. Like, if he reaches the Super Bowl and then he wins the Super Bowl, he's already a first ballot Hall of Famer. But
he's going to win it. He's probably going to win his third MVP this year.
I was going to say, there's a world where he wins an MVP and a Super Bowl. But again, though, you have, and it's not even just against the Chiefs. We have to see Lamar show up in the playoffs, period. So, it's not just the Chiefs.
This is all assuming, that they will.
Yeah, 100%. But there is a world where he wins the MVP and the Super Bowl. If the Ravens lose
their first playoff game this year, there are definitely going to be continued questions about Lamar and what's going wrong. But I think this is the year they break through. Well, let's get into fantasy here. Kendall, We're looking at the fantasy fallout from week 9. Aaron Rodgers looking pretty good. Are you trusting this as a positive regression? Is he a starting QB now? What's going on?
In one of my leagues where I have Jordan Love on a bye, I picked up Aaron Rodgers, and I'm playing him against Arizona this week. He's had 10 touchdown passes the last 5 weeks. They are not running the football in close. They are throwing it.
Not
and
at all.
we've watched, yeah, like it sucks for Brees Hall
Brees Hall
owners.
owners.
Because like he's still effective running between the 20s, but they're just not giving him the ball in the red zone. And whenever he's gotten soft matchups with these receivers on the outside, we finally saw Devontae Adams really come to life this past week. And knowing they're going against another soft defense this weekend, I think he has certainly climbed into the startable range, which, a month ago, most people wouldn't have expected that. He was buried down in low QB2 status. But I think Aaron Rodgers is certainly worth a start. And another guy that has really climbed up the rankings and quietly put together a few really good weeks is Justin Herbert. We all left him for dead in fantasy, mostly because they were that run first, run second offense that, we were throwing the ball 21 times a game. Well, now he's slinging it 30 plus times a game. They're not running the football nearly as effectively. And with all those receivers, and suddenly, McConkey's really coming on as a rookie receiver, Quentin Johnston back, and he looked really good again. Like, I feel like if the matchup is right, there's certainly a spot where you could see yourself starting Justin Herbert again this weekend.
Harbaugh is so good. Harbaugh is so good because he looked at that team and said, we're going to run the ball. And then without them losing games first to make a decision too late, he saw that the running efficiency was going down a little bit and the games were getting closer. And he said, let's use our superstar quarterback. At the same time, let's not dog our former overly drafted first-round draft pick that still has physical talent in Quentin Johnston. And he's done nothing but prop him up in the press, prop him up behind the scenes, I'm sure. And he's getting the most out of this guy that has yards after catch ability. And he has a superstar quarterback that showed so much promise in his rookie year and through so much dysfunction in the franchise. Has kind of been up, down, a little injured here and there. So I just want to give a quick shout out to Harbaugh because so many coaches wait until the bottom falls out to make these type of philosophy decisions that they have where they switch from being so run heavy to more balanced and letting their slinger sling the ball. So I just,
well, and
I'm with
also,
you on
let's
that.
not forget, too, Herbert always has a rushing floor. He's going to run the ball 4 to 8 times a game, and he tends to break off 20-yard runs, every so often. He can move on the ground as well, so it's not like he's just a statue back there also. So, like, I'm with you. Like, it's been impressive. I've been a huge Harbaugh fan for a long time, and I know that's, a controversial opinion to have because a lot of people don't like him, and a lot of people really do. I'm a Michigan guy, so, I've certainly always been a fan of his for a very long time. But it's just impressive to see what he's done there. And they're one of the few teams left on that Chiefs schedule that could trip up the Chiefs. Even though the game will be in Kansas City, they tend to always hang with them. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe that's one of the L's that they get the rest of the season. But yeah, so I definitely think it's been impressive what Herbert's been able to do. And as we go forward into the second half of the season, Herbert's sitting on waivers in almost every league. If you have guys on bye or guys at position, he's certainly worth taking a look at.
Yeah, a little further down on him than you guys. But if you're in need of a quarterback, I'd agree. Go check out waiver wire.
Yeah, another guy I do on the same capacity where buys and then looking forward for potentially more consistent production is Matt Stafford. Stafford, he's got his receivers back, and that offense is going to be humming. And yes, Puka, after a pseudo punch, was ejected, questionable ejection in that game last week. He didn't have him to throw. He still threw 2 to Demarcus Robinson, including a game-winning absolute strike. Great catch as well.
Yeah.
So I like Stafford coming through. Now that McVay has his guys again, you best believe they're going to be slinging that thing all over the yard.
I would say, I think Matthew Stafford may be the most underrated player at the moment. You're talking about a guy who, if you look at him objectively, you could say he's the best QB in the league. Won a Super Bowl. Other than Mahomes, he's contributed to the greatest receiving seasons of all time 4 times. Throws the ball better than anybody. Matthew Stafford, I feel like, is the most underrated player in football right now. He keeps the Rams a threat in every game. Even if Puka punches him.
I mean, the only reason I wouldn't call him underrated at this point, I think when he was in Detroit, yes, but the only reason I wouldn't call him underrated at this point is just because I feel like he's always in like, at least an analyst that I've seen, he's always in like top 8 QB conversations all the time. Like, I mean, I feel like people give him his flowers, especially since the Super Bowl and all
I
that
just
stuff.
feel
But I'm
like
with you,
if
Drew.
he's not in the top 3 conversation, it's a problem. Based on his stats, based on his legacy, winning a Super Bowl, and all the stats
he's
he's put up,
he's just
I feel
a little
like top
older.
3 is outside. But yeah,
Yeah, he's just a little older. So, I mean, the guys that don't have such an offensive genius scheming up plays so well, they're taking, the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, they're younger, they're more dynamic, and they're carrying heavier. Not that Stafford isn't carrying a load, but he's got Sean McVay with a brilliant scheme that's actually scheming guys open instead of relying on pure talent. So I'm with you, Drew. I've always loved Matt Stafford. I loved him in Detroit. And
yes, he is 36. The Josh Allens of the world are not 36. He's been doing it for a long time, though, and he's succeeded and won a Super Bowl. And you're looking at a Rams team that still has a shot at winning this division.
It's crazy. That division's crazy.
Yeah, that division's going to be wild. It'll definitely come down to the finish. I mean, at this point, you could make a strong argument, especially knowing Arizona's light schedule rest away. Arizona might actually be the favorite to win that division, as crazy as it sounds.
Arizona is in the lead in that team.
Yeah,
They
they're the only team with a winning record right now.
And the team
like, their
4
defense
places
has shown up.
behind
Like,
them in last is the Seahawks, who are winning games for Arizona. Whole division is winning 1 game. Like, that's going to come down to the last week for sure.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. All right, guys, some more really, really important fantasy news for everyone to be aware of. Another week of wide receiver injuries. It just keeps piling on. It's unbelievable. Like you keep waiting for it to end, and it doesn't. So CeeDee Lamb, he left Sunday's game with a shoulder injury. He's questionable for now. But even when he does come back, even if he plays this weekend, Cooper Rush is their quarterback. So you gotta take that into consideration and probably keep your expectations tempered to some degree. A.J. Brown also left early in Philly's game against Jacksonville. He suffered a knee injury. He's day-to-day. Drake London, another guy who left early, hurt his hip. He left in the first half of that game. Thankfully for fantasy owners who started him like myself, he at least scored a touchdown really quick in the first quarter before then leaving the game shortly thereafter. So at least you didn't get a donut from him. And Chris Olave, Jesus Christ, what can you say?
Stop
Poor guy,
the ball over the middle. That's what you can say.
I just think that he should take his millions and go home. It looks pretty crazy. He's at 3 this year already. Real quick, I did want to talk real quick about CD real quick because he's had games with Cooper Rush and averages 16.5 points per game, and his AC joint sprain is looking like it's really minor. So I just want to throw that out there as far as there is data with Cooper Rush.
CeeDee Lamb, so Rob's going to be the CeeDee Lamb apologist here.
Well, no, I mean,
with no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't make up math, right? So I mean, there's stats with Cooper
you're
Rush.
You're quoting stats from Cooper Rush on former Cowboys team, where he stepped into a good team and took over and still produced. This Cowboys
but a backup quarterback hyper-targeting a wide receiver one is not really Cowboys specific. So
no, but,
I mean,
but even as a Lamb owner, Rob, despite those numbers, you yourself have to admit, like, you can't possibly have the same ceiling in your mind as you would if Dak Prescott was playing.
No, but to be honest, CD hasn't.
So that was my point. It's just you have to temper expectations.
Benching CD in fantasy for sure, but you're in trouble.
He hasn't performed outside of like the blow up game recently. He hasn't really performed with that type of ceiling yet. Anyway, now I mean, obviously it looked good. My post bye predictions for that team looked good for the game right after the bye. He did exactly what I thought they would, but now with Dak injury, obviously that's thrown in. I just there's plenty of data with Cooper Rush. He knows how to hyper target CD. So like, yes, the ceiling is not there, but the averages are still there. So, it's not
you're
like
still
pure
starting
panic.
him, but you're not hoping for the 40-point CD game.
Yeah.
Now you're hoping he's going to land in the 15 to 20 range, which will be good. Yeah. But if CD was carrying your team, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and it's so crazy because, Kendall, you just alluded to it. I mean, that wide receiver injuries are out of control. It's always been a good strategy in fantasy to hold handcuff running backs. But in our keeper league, I've been happy enough with my starting lineup where I've actually sacrificed some bench spots for a lot of handcuff running backs. And usually in a year, at least one, if you have like the 5 that I have, would have popped up right now. No handcuff running backs are basically useful this year. The running backs have stayed so healthy overall, with a couple exceptions like Christian McCaffrey
except for San Fran and maybe a couple other places.
In general, guys like me.
Well, in general, though, it's so crazy because handcuffs, everyone's been like waiting for these handcuffs. None of them have happened. Like,
Nothing.
It's so wild.
Yeah.
Well, and unfortunately, in years past, when there are running back injuries and you have those handcuffs, they immediately become RB2s or maybe RB1s like Jordan Mason was for a while earlier in the season, right? But receivers, the same can't be said. It's never been like that. When there's a receiver that goes down, it doesn't mean that next receiver up is suddenly going to be that guy or close to that level of production. It just doesn't work that way in the NFL. And so you can't really just grab or stack these backup receivers and just hope that, hey, all right, well, that guy went down, so he's going to take up that mantle. So it's made it really, really difficult on a lot of fantasy managers who are just losing receivers left and right to injury. It has definitely been a
Chris
wild
Godwin
season.
that I lost in our League of Record hasn't played for weeks. He's still wide receiver 6. So that's just such a huge loss. It's such a huge loss for managers that had, that had some of these wide receivers like that. It's hard to account for how much that's.
Well, and so we talked about like a lot of guys getting nicked up, especially at the wide receiver position. But this week, we should be seeing a lot of faces coming back at a number of different positions. McCaffrey obviously headlining it. In theory, like they opened the window. He started practicing on Monday. Shanahan has said he expects him to be there and to play this weekend. The matchup isn't the best. The Bucs are still pretty solid against the run. The Chiefs struggled to run the ball for most of the game on Monday until they wore them down into the fourth quarter and overtime.
The Chiefs did not have Christian McCaffrey.
Well, and we're also actually not good against the run this year. So, we're actually
relative to where you are normally. Running backs are still finishing 18th. You're giving up the 18th most fantasy points to running backs this year. So you're a middle of the pack defense from a fantasy perspective.
Totally.
So
I would say
it's,
if you're
it's
a
not
Christian
a
McCaffrey
cake matchup. You have to wonder.
Well, if you're a Christian McCaffrey
are they just going to unleash McCaffrey? Do you think they just say, "Hey"?
No.
Yeah.
No, right?
No, because
think so.
No, they're not going to, guys. So if you're a Christian McCaffrey owner, you will play him, but they're not going to give him 25 touches in this game. This is you got to remember, this is a usage injury. So this is going to be a thing that you monitor all season long. They're not going to give him 25 to 30 touches. What he is going to do is he's a huge red zone threat. He's obviously going to be part of the red zone packages. They're going to play him on drives. But this is not a game, like, you have to understand the type of injury he's having. This is not like a concussion where the body's fine, so as soon as he's ready to go, you'll throw him in for his normal allotment. This is going to be, we're going to see how it goes, and as the season goes on, we're going to be somewhat monitoring his load, because if you start overloading him again, this problem he's having is not like, oh, it's healed up and now it's done. This is a flare-up problem of inflammation to both Achilles, not just one. So we have both legs that we're looking at here. So, you got to play Christian McCaffrey the same way Puka came back. You've been waiting for so long. You got to play him.
What did Puka do in that first game back?
Yeah, and so like I said, I think he'll be good for a touchdown, like a red zone and stuff like that. But like I said, that the main point was that he won't get 25 touches in this game.
Well, especially knowing Isaac Guarendo. Well, let's also not forget, like, the rookie Isaac Guarendo has played phenomenally the last couple of weeks while Jordan Mason was dealing with an injury. Mason still is nicked up. He's not fully healthy. So I would expect Guarendo to potentially get more run, even if Mason is active. But knowing how productive those other guys have been, I agree with you, Rob, that we're not going to see him on the field for 70, 80% of the snaps. But he does still change that offense so much by his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield and make plays that they still need to rely on him. They're in a dogfight in that division. They can't afford to be dropping games against another team that's also in a desperate situation. So I think we'll still see him out there plenty, but I agree that I don't think you're going to see 25 or more touches from him this game?
I think he'll
I
get. I
wouldn't
think
say,
he, I think
hold
you
on, I
feel
wouldn't
pretty.
say 25 touches, maybe. But the San Francisco 49ers have a big track record of once you're back, we're going to pump you in with this game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just see him.
Jordan
I see
Mason
him getting
Garendo
heavy
might
red
be
zone
having good
usage. So
stats. He might not get 25 carries, but I think, like
I
Kendall
would feel
said,
good about him
they
getting a
need this
touchdown.
win, and I think they're going to lean on McCaffrey. And I think they also waited until he was healthy to put him back in. I think he's probably 2 weeks from being healthy enough to play, and now he's playing. I look for him as a 20-point plus fantasy player.
All right. Well, I'm curious, you guys. Another guy who's coming back after missing a couple weeks, but for a completely unrelated reason, is Jameson Williams. So prior to his suspension,
For too much Viagra? What was the suspension for? I've heard for too much Viagra. That's the report, but maybe that's
nevertheless, Dan Campbell has openly said we plan on getting him out there and using him just like we did before. He's not going to be limited in any way. It obviously wasn't injury related. Prior to his suspension, he was a boomer bust, but much more consistently a boom receiver because he was that downfield threat guy. And so are you personally plugging him back into lineups this week?
I mean, I own Jameson Williams. I don't trust Dan Campbell saying that he's going to pump the ball to him. I didn't trust him before he got suspended. It was you catch a 70-yard pass this week or not. Now you've been
But he did 5 out of 7 games. He caught 70-yard touchdown 5 out of 7 games.
Yeah,
Like at some point,
3 for 76. I get it. But I didn't trust him on that before. He might still hit. If he hits, it doesn't mean it just means, I didn't trust that he would.
So
The unfortunate thing for
are you
him-
starting him?
No, I'm not starting him this week.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing for Jameson
outside of
How about you, Rob?
Yeah, the unfortunate thing for Jameson Williams in fantasy is that in real life the Lions don't need him. So I mean,
Exactly.
it's one of those things where I think he'll get one big deep shot, or I mean a couple, but at least connect on one big deep shot, and then they love doing that reverse. They love doing that reverse that actually like a lot of other teams have copied off of them. Not that it was like the most original play, but they brought it back into the forefront. And so they love doing that. So, but you have to hope those hit, and so, I mean, but the thing is they don't need them in, and Gibbs has really showed out, with the way that they're playing. And then Sam Laporta got some. I mean, I think Sam Laporta owners are probably the most upset at this because it seems like when Jameson plays, somehow that takes away from Laporta's usage, even though they play completely different areas of the field. But yeah, I mean, Jameson is exactly the type of player that I'm always hesitant to draft because he's a low-touch, high-efficiency guy, and so that always makes me nervous to start, even when he's on a heater. So, I mean, like him coming right back, if I was a Jameson owner, I probably – now, look, you don't know on bye week. You might have to play him and stuff, but all things considered, without bye week implications and all that stuff, you have your normal team set. I'm always a little nervous to play a guy like that.
Yeah, same, and – luckily, on the team that I have him rostered, he's my 5th receiver. And on the other team that I had him rostered, I just traded him away for an upgrade. I did a 3-for-1 to acquire Lamb, which then Lamb immediately got hurt. But Olave was also in that trade, so that was a little bit of a wash. But, I mean, I'm with you. There's certainly hesitation. But most owners, if you're not deep at receiver, especially considering, as we talked about, all those receiver injuries across the entire league, there's probably a lot of fantasy managers that don't have that luxury. And because he has been mostly consistent at catching that 60-yard bomb, usually for a score, I think he still offers flex value, knowing more times than not, he's going to at least get that 12 points for you. There's only been, I think, 2 games this year that he didn't hit those double digits that he played. So knowing the landscape and the injury situation that so many people are dealing with, there's a good chance that a lot of managers will have to start him. I'm just glad that I have depth at that position and have avoided the injury bug for the most part, that I'm not going to have to start him. Another receiver that might be coming back this week, and man, people just week after week, they keep hoping he's going to come back, and he just continues to not be able to come back, as T. Higgins. He was performing so well prior to his injury, and they're playing on a short week, though, against the Baltimore Ravens. You'd love to see him play in this matchup, obviously, and feast against that horrendous secondary, as we talked about. He still hasn't practiced this week as of yet,
At
but
all.
I'm sure they would love to get him on the field.
I only because this is a Thursday game. I don't think he's coming back this week. He just hasn't practiced, and it's been a story of his career. And it seems like he gets injured in practice more than in games. So I mean, it's a really interesting thing with T. Higgins here. I've heard people jokingly be like, "Dude, just don't let him practice. Let him just do walkthroughs, and then let him play in the game because he always seems to get hurt in practice." But yeah, only because it's a Thursday night football short week and he hasn't practiced yet, and it's Wednesday. So, I mean, I don't – this will be the final determination practice, but I don't see him coming back. So, as a guy that picked up Mike Gesicki last week, I'm excited to play him again in a league where I have 6 players, 6 starters on bye.
Gesicki might be a league winner.
It just depends on when he comes back. I love what he's done on that team, but when T. Higgins comes back, I'm not sure. But Eric All Jr., the other tight end on that team, did get injured this last game. So maybe there's a role in sometimes with these teams, it takes an opportunity where you run with it and then they start incorporating you more into the game plan. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, Mike Gesicki is awesome. He's always been a good receiver and a good red zone threat. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Kendall, just to bring it home. Yeah, T. Higgins on Thursday night, if I'm having him, I'm planning another receiver. I don't think he's coming back.
And one last receiver that I'm hoping he does come back this week, and rest of season, I might be higher on this guy than anybody in the fantasy community. That's Jauan Jennings. We're yet to see him play a full complement of snaps and play a game ever since Ayuk tore his ACL and MCL. And knowing they're getting CMC back this week, and that offense should look pretty good and start moving the football regularly once again. And Debo was there and healthy. He played and made it through the whole game with pneumonia last 2 weeks ago. And they had their bye. We've seen Jauan Jennings when he has the opportunity to play a full game as a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2. And he runs a similar route tree as Brandon Ayuk. And he seems to have a lot of similar skill sets, similar build. And for all those reasons, I personally have Jauan Jennings ahead of Debo rest of season, and I might have him as like a high wide receiver too. Maybe I'm a little high, but I feel like he's looking at a really, really big fantasy finish for the 49ers.
No, I think that's a bold take, Cotton, but not bad. Honestly, I feel like you're right. We haven't seen him healthy while Ayuk is not healthy since the start of the season, where he looked like a legitimate wide receiver 1. I would say Jauan Jennings is one of the sleeperiest players in fantasy.
Yeah, I'd be excited if I had him. Now, I did pick him up on waiver for that big blow-up game, so he definitely helped me this year. But I will say, like, the thing about the 49ers and the thing about drafting Ayuk I've always been hesitant to is between Debo and Kittle, and now CMC is back and things like that. It's always like, it always feels a little bit of like who's going to have the big week. And when Debo's healthy, it seems like more often than not, it's more Debo than Ayuk or Jauan in this case filling in for that role. And with Kittle having much more involvement in the passing game right now, maybe it's just at a need because of the injuries to the wide receiver. But everyone's always kind of been hoping that they put Kittle in for his talents and a little bit less on the run blocking, a little more on the receiving game. So he's really stepped up and been such a big receiver in this game. So I'm with you, Kendall, on high hopes. I maybe not as high hopes as you have, but if I have Jauan Jennings, I'm very excited for rest of season, and because you probably only need him as like a wide receiver 3. So I mean, it's definitely a great pickup.
All right, guys. So now it's time to transition. We're going to take a look at a couple of the key games coming up this weekend. Last week, you guys both went 3-1 against the spread, which is really, really good. It's not quite as good as my 4-0, but 3-1. So come by. I mean, hey, I told you, man, Baltimore, Denver has to run the football well for them to stay in games, and Baltimore wasn't going to let that happen. They were going to get a lead and run away with it. It played out exactly as I predicted. It also helped me hit my money line parlay last week. So it was a gravy train weekend last weekend. So let's take a look at some key games coming up in Week 10. Let's start with the aforementioned 49ers. They're giving the Bucs 5.5. Tampa Bay at home, but they're coming off a short week, having played that physical overtime game against the Chiefs in the rain. Rob, the resident Bucs fan, why don't you kick us off? Who do you like in this game?
Well, I took the Bucs to cover last week against the Chiefs. That was right. So I mean, look, man, it's hard for me to watch how we showed up, and as much as I'm finished with Todd Bowles. Thank you for your service, and then please leave our franchise. I just love so much what Liam Cohen is doing, and I know I'm the Bucs fan, and maybe this is gonna come off wrong, but I think that we've been so close in so many of these games. It's just the problem is, again, our head coach, I think, makes terrible, crucial, game-breaking decisions at the worst times. And with timeout usage, we lose points at every half. But I actually think that the Bucs win this game outright. So I'm gonna absolutely take the Bucs to cover the spread. I just think that we win this game. I think the way that we showed up, I think it, as much as it was a disappointing loss, I mean, that game could have been a win if we didn't lose a coin toss, or if we had gone for two. I mean, it was that close. So the 49ers, I don't think, have the defense the Chiefs have. And yes, Christian McCaffrey's coming back, but I don't think that it's going to be like the Christian McCaffrey dominating, hand him off 20. We already talked about this, 25 touches and stuff like that. So I like how we match up with them this week for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Rob's not going far enough. I'm right with him. I think the Buccaneers win this game outright. I think even Buccaneers fans have to be a little hurt after this last week. But this team has looked good all year. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey's coming back with the Niners for I'm taking the couple of years. So let it 5.
So I'll make it a trifecta in terms of taking the points. I think San Francisco wins the game outright. I think Tampa offensively, and to your point, Rob, what Liam Cohen has done with that offense, you lose Godwin, Evans isn't there, and the offense is still humming. And he's throwing it to fucking Tom, Dick, and Harry, and he made Cade Otton look like a Pro Bowl tight end, not to mention Baker Mayfield putting up Pro Bowl numbers. So against that San Fran defense, I expect them to be able to move the football well, but it is difficult for any team to overcome. You're on the road in Kansas City on a Monday night with a chance to beat the two-time defending champs, and you don't go for two, you lose a coin toss, you never see the football again. You have to wonder how much of the players, are they bitter at their head coach? Is there any fracturing within that organization? Not to mention there's also just the mental psyche of losing another close loss. And this San Francisco team coming off of a bye. Shanahan's one of the best coaches in the league off a bye. So for that reason, I like San Fran to win, but I'm with you guys. I like Tampa to cover. All right. Maybe the best matchup, at least record-wise, coming into the week, the Pittsburgh Steelers coming off a bye. Speaking of byes, they're coming off a bye, heading on the road to face the Washington Commanders. Washington is favored by 3 points. And, this is a really difficult game to dissect, I feel like, for a number of different reasons. Jaden and the offense hasn't quite been humming the way they were before he got hurt, but they still moved the football pretty well against the Giants. But how much of that was it's the New York Football Giants? And also their defense didn't look all that inspiring. We know Pittsburgh's defense has looked really, really good pretty much all season. And again, they're coming off the bye. I just have a hard time picking this Pittsburgh team to win many games. And with the spread sitting at 3, I feel like I need to take Washington and lay the 3. How about you guys?
Oh, I'm on the opposite side. The way the Steelers have looked, the way their defense is playing, the way they keep winning games that they weren't supposed to win, I'll take the Steelers. Give me the 3 points, but I'll take the Steelers for sure.
This is a really tough one for me because the Steelers' defense is nasty. And Jaden Daniels, I still think with the rib injury, I think that's still been bothering him a little bit. And Marshawn Lattimore is a big pickup for them, but he's not going to help them this week. I'm just going to bet on Jaden Daniels here. So I'm actually with you, Kendall, on the Commanders, but I don't feel safe about it at all because I do see a world where like Drew's alluding to, the Steelers play good enough defense. Russ makes a couple of good plays to Pickens, and then I think the Steelers are at their best when Najee Harris can go off in the second half and they can run the football with him. So
Yep.
I don't feel good about it, but I'm with you, Kendall. I'm taking the Commanders.
All right. Another matchup of two really, really strong football teams. Detroit Lions sitting at 7-1, look like the best team in the NFC thus far. They're favored by 3.5. They hit the road to take on the Houston Texans. Houston obviously hasn't looked nearly the same offensively after losing Nico and losing Stephon Diggs. Nico is at least slated he might play this weekend. We still don't know if he's going to play.
He's teasing it for sure.
Yeah, and DeMeco Ryan said, we're keeping our eye on it. We'll update you with his status. But there hasn't been any, factual information that leads me to believe he's going to come back and play this game. And without him, knowing Detroit is so stout against the run, and Houston's entire offense has been predicated, even when they had Collins and Diggs, it was a run-first offense, and it was a run-first offense last year. I think if they struggle to run this week, which I think they will struggle to move the football on the ground, they're going to have a hard time overall scoring points. And even though Houston's defense is solid, they're 4-0 at home. They played really, really well down in Houston. I'm going to take Detroit. I'm going to lay the 3.5. I think this team they feel really, really good. And even though it will be close, I think they win by one score. I'm taking Detroit laying the 3.5.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Nico didn't practice today, is what I've heard. But honestly, I'm taking the Lions here, whether Nico plays or not. I'm going with a team that looks like the better team on both phases of the ball, offense, defense. Lions look better, taking 4 points for sure.
Oh,
yeah,
you're laying
Nico
the
doesn't.
3.5.
If Nico doesn't play, I'm for sure taking the Lions by like 10. But if Nico plays, there's a little bit of an argument there. I mean, Texans' weakness is their offensive line. It's led to C.J. Stroud's regression, but they are at home, which helps C.J. And the Lions, they got Zadarius Smith, but their pass rushing is not super great, which would be the matchup on the Texans' weakness. But like I said, if Nico doesn't play, I mean, I see the Lions winning by 10, more than just one score. And even if Nico does play, I guess at the end of this, it was, I just, all that to say that I would still lay the points for the Lions. But I mean, it's like I said, if Nico doesn't play, I mean, just an easy bet for me.
So it's funny, none of us are baited by the hook. I know Vegas is very much planning. They set that line at 3.5, expecting a lot of money to come in on Houston. And thus far, a lot of money has come in on Houston. But it seems like we're all aligned. We're taking Detroit regardless.
Yeah.
All right, one other divisional matchup, and it's one that tends to give a team some problems. The Kansas City Chiefs, they're at home again. I feel like every week they're at home. I know it's not the case. It just seems like that. They're at home again, giving 8.5 to the Denver Broncos. And let's not forget, last year the Broncos came very, very close to beating the Chiefs a couple times, and they tend to play them well. So the line's sitting at 8.5. Rob, where are you going with this one?
Yeah, these 8.5 lines, same with the Ravens. Like, I hate seeing that because it's such a big, fat line, dude. And, in the moment, recency, you're going to say DeAndre Hopkins unlocked their offense and, they look unstoppable and all this
I
stuff.
am going to say that.
Yeah, I figured. But 8.5, I mean, I know it didn't work out last week with the Ravens, but process over results, and I'm just gonna take the Broncos here with this spread, whether it's a backdoor cover or not, but the Chiefs, they play games close. They're not really blowing out anybody, and it took a coin toss to win the last one, so I'm gonna take the Broncos here with this 8.5 spread.
Yeah, I'm taking the Chiefs. I think things are moving. I think they have unlocked that offense, so I'm taking the Chiefs to win by 2.
So I am also going to take the Chiefs to cover, but it has very little to do with the Chiefs' offense and has everything to do with the other side of the ball. The same reason why I predicted the Broncos would lose, I said 30-6, they lost 41-10, is that entire offense is predicated on the ability to stay ahead of the chains and make things easier for that rookie quarterback. And they weren't able to do it against Baltimore. They weren't able to run the football at all. Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin couldn't get any yardage on first or second down. And I don't think they're going to do that in this game either. And in that building, having a rookie quarterback going in there against an improving offense with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I just have a really hard time.
I'm gonna pull a Kendall actually and do a flipper-rooney because I
convinced you.
I'm looking at it
I
now.
love that.
I'm looking at it now, and who am I talking about? It's Sean Payton. I can't wait to root against that guy. So I'm gonna take the Chiefs here as well. Let's see a 17-point victory. Let's see a 17.
Now, I agree with something that you did point out or you touched on a minute ago, Rob. I do think there is an opportunity for a backdoor cover because I don't see this game being 30-6 like I predicted with the Ravens game last week. This divisional matchup, they know each other really, really well. This Denver defense is also a very good defense. Like what happened last week was more of an aberration than anything. So I do think that they aren't getting their doors blown off them like they did last week. And there is a chance that they cover late, but there's too much momentum for me to make that pick solely on thinking they could get a backdoor cover. So
yeah, but it's like
I see this game more as Chiefs win by 10, Chiefs win by 13.
I was going to say, like, even if it's not a 20-point victory, because that's just not the Chiefs team right now. Like, that's not how they're playing games. I mean, it's not hard to see a 10-point victory. It's just not. Like, so, I mean, it's, I'm with you. I ended up coming back around with you guys. I reserve the right to change my mind, but
I love that.
All right. Should we do a run through of the rest of the games and see
yes.
who everybody likes?
Yeah, let's go through all of them. Hold on. I've got the Panthers game first up. I assume everyone is taking the Panthers in the Giants-Panthers contest.
No, I'm going to take the Giants.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Giants too.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Giants as well.
Okay.
Hey, I mean,
well,
they're both 2-7.
The bottom of the yeah. But
let me flip. I'll take the Panthers. I honestly think it's a toss-up. So I'll take the Panthers just to even out the picks.
I'll tell you who's really going to lose that game. Football fans in Germany who have to watch
watching this game. Yeah.
Which is, we're sending those two teams to Munich. Like,
no, the Germans aren't that discerning.
That was the best idea.
We'll figure it out.
Well, and they knew what they were doing because no one had the Giants and Panthers being good this year. So the schedulers knew this is not like a surprise
That's
aberration.
What you get, Germany. That's what you get.
This is like, yeah.
All right. How about more important games? Heavily debated playoff contest between the Patriots and Bears.
That's tough because, Drake May, he's really transformed and breathed some belief into that team. But the Bears defense, even though it hasn't played its best the last couple of weeks, at home, they've been playing really stellar. So I'm going to take Chicago at home.
Yeah, I'm really excited for Drake May's future. He's really impressed me, but Chicago defense is nothing to sniff at. And, the relationship between Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze is starting to build. So you can see that they're finding confidence in each other. And, DJ Moore is taking himself out of plays in the middle of a play.
That's honestly not a good sign.
I've been like, I know this is a side note, we're doing quick picks, but I've been so disappointed with DJ Moore, not from a sense of like production, but he just seems like such a whiny baby. Like he just seems like he's always like,
you mean a receiver that's used to putting up 1,200 yards who's suddenly not putting up 1,200 yards is a whiny baby? Isn't that like customary for wide receivers?
I'm going to interject here, Rob. I guess you're taking the Bears.
The Bears, yeah, taking the Bears.
I want to interject here. There is one of us who sat here 2 weeks ago and said, listen, the Bears are bullshit. Since then, they're 0-2. They're playing a Patriots team that has a great defense and a quarterback who's improving. We're watching the Bears' offense is one of the worst run offenses I've ever fucking seen. Sorry.
Well, it's a terrible fit. It's the worst fit offense in the league.
All day here to back up my Bears will collapse theory. I'm taking the Patriots.
Okay.
I'm glad we brought it all back to the Buccaneers here, but either way, that doesn't have the parts. I agree. That's why I'm taking the pass. All right. Now, I'm going to guess we all agree that the Bills will beat the Colts this week. Yep.
Yes, but it's going to be closer than people expect. Yeah.
If they start Anthony Richardson, I'd go Colts. But I agree. How about the Broncos? Are anyone taking the Broncos to beat the Chiefs? We discussed this.
No, we already talked about this. Yeah, we all have the
Falcons
Chiefs covering.
Saints in the NFC South.
Yeah, you got to take the Falcons. Saints are shipping
All
guys
three,
out.
yeah.
They're a mess.
Absolutely. Talked about Niners, Bucks. How about we talked about Steelers, Commanders? How about the Vikings and the Jaguars? At home, can the Jaguars pull off a steal?
No,
I'm going to go Jaguars here. Let's mix it up.
I like the Jags to cover the spread, but I don't think they win the game.
4.5.
4.5.
I'm going to take the Jaguars here. I think Minnesota is flailing. Titans versus Chargers in Los Angeles. Road game for the Chargers. Who you got?
Chargers.
Still taking the Chargers.
Chargers all day.
The Eagles hold up their division supremacy versus the Cowboys.
Eagles.
Eagles. All right. Jets, Cardinals. Here's an interesting game.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially a coin toss. The Jets are favored by 0.5 point. Arizona's really turned their season around, but I actually like the Jets to go on the road and win this game, and I feel like I'm going against the grain there, but it's just a gut pick.
Interestingly, I think Rob just made all my points for me, but for those reasons, I'm taking the Cardinals. How about the biggest game of the week, Monday night, Dolphins, Rams? What do you got?
This game is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I expect
It's
there to
going to
be
be a good game.
a lot of big plays, and it will be a good game. I think I kind of like the Dolphins to go on the road and get a win.
Go ahead, Rob. Obviously I'm a homer, but I'm going Dolphins here. I think the Finns have been unlocking their offense since Tua came back. Both games the last 2 weeks decided by a last-second field goal. The Dolphins have one of the best pass defenses in the league, which is what the Rams are relying on. I think the Dolphins pulling out here.
It should be a lot of fun. Hey, let's not forget, we didn't talk about the Thursday game.
I missed that one. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Which might be the biggest game of the week, Cincinnati going on the road to Baltimore.
Game of the week, Cincinnati, Baltimore. I'm taking Baltimore for sure. By 2 touchdowns, I think Cincinnati's going to have to retreat into a cave after this.
I'm going to buck that trend. I got the Bengals. I think Cincinnati knows 3 weeks ago when they also didn't have T. Higgins and they were up by 10 with 3 minutes left in that game, or 6 minutes left, up 10 late in the fourth quarter. They let that game get away. And what does Cincinnati do really well offensively is throw the football. I don't think bringing in, trading for this old corner that we talked about is over the hill is going to make much of a difference, especially, with no practice short week. So I'm actually going to take the Bengals in an upset here.
I love the faith. Well, that, I think, brings us to Kendall's corner. Kendall, what do you have for us this week as far as betting goes?
Dude, I mean, at this point, we have been printing money at Kendall's Corner this season. Last week, went 4 for 4 on games. We also hit our money line parlay. I even personally added 3 college games to my money line parlay and hit a 16 money line parlay personally last week. I'm going to keep the college teams out of it for this week, but this week there's 2 different ways you can go about it. Our parlay, money line parlay of the week, you put the Eagles against the Cowboys, the Chiefs against the Broncos, and the Chargers against the Titans. Those 3 to win at even money. All 3 of them, I feel, are borderline locks to win the game. And then also knowing what those spreads are, if you want to increase your odds, instead of betting the money line parlay, you can actually tease them. You can tease the Eagles down to 1, the Chiefs down to 2.5, Chargers down to 1.5. More than likely, if they win those games, it'll be by more than a point. You'll get plus 140. That's Kendall's Corner. Let's make some more money.
I love it. Well, I think that does it this week for the Winning Play podcast. I'm Drew James here with Kendall Capps and Robb Hue. Go out there and make some winning plays. We'll see you next week.